Welcome and thank you all for joining us for this very special series of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. I'm your host, Shanti Ryle, and this is the Women of Influence series, delivering next-level insights and expertise live from GlobeSt's Women of Influence conference. And today we are thrilled to sit down with Shayna Platt, Senior Director of Environmental Social Governance, or ESG, at Biomed Realty. Shayna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shanti. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. Very excited to hear more about your story in commercial real estate. So bringing us up to speed, how did you get your start in the sector and what eventually led you to working in ESG in particular?
Great question. So I began my career at Deloitte & Touche.
Okay.
In the typical CPA route, working in assurance, primarily for technology and real estate companies. Mm-hmm. So I had early exposure there. Mm-hmm. Quickly realized that commercial real estate was a much easier intersection with regards to ESG. Crosses the gamut in terms of how other companies are monitoring and taking care of their tangible assets.
Okay.
And quickly moved into Deloitte's national sustainability team.
Yeah.
So it was a smaller team of about 6 people at the time that I had joined, and quickly got exposure into more of the world of ESG and how it crosses over with commercial real estate.
Yeah. And I'm curious, so it sounded like kind of working in those policy fields was the initial passion, like working with sustainability and environmental focused work. So where did that original passion come from? And then when you found commercial real estate, what about it made you go, oh, like maybe that's where I can do my best work, or, oh, maybe there's so many problems here that I want to solve. What about it in particular captivated you and like put that fire in your belly as far as a career path?
Yeah, it really started at my time in university. So I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Love Santa Barbara. It's so pretty.
Yes, it is. And it's one of the few universities on a coastline. So naturally, you're exposed to the impact of the environment and climate change. I had studied abroad at an institute. It's University of Bocconi. It was an economics institute in Milan, and that's really where I focused wholeheartedly on corporate social responsibility and ESG in the commercial real estate sector. So I always knew that was my passion and that was something I wanted to do. I think I just had to wait until the demand was there.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting into, you were at Deloitte, now you're at Biomed Realty. What does your day-to-day look like, I guess? Like what projects are you focusing most of your energy on? What is the mission behind what Biomed Realty is doing? Can you give us a little insight into the company and your work there?
Of course. So Biomed Realty, they are a leading provider of real estate solutions for the life sciences and technology sector. What attracted me to the company was the development that we were undergoing and the impact to integrate ESG early on in that decision-making process. My day-to-day, it really varies depending on the day.
Sure.
ESG runs a wide gamut. So starting with Biomed, really building out that ESG focus, it started with narrowing into the topics that we would hone in on. And as of more recently, a couple of the things we've done, we launched a DEI roadshow where we did an unconscious bias and inclusive leadership training.
That's cool.
It
like
was
just went company to company, like offering those services for different organizations, or what did that look like?
So it was in-house driven. We brought in a guest speaker and ultimately traveled to the different offices to help build those skills. And, we're at a time where there are 5 generations in the workforce and making sure that people are aware of their potential blind spots and how that might impact retaining, attracting future talent.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for those who are listening who may not be as familiar with what ESG is, can you explain kind of the idea behind it or ideas behind it and why first it's so essential just in the work environment in our culture, but then most specifically in commercial real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that it's very important in commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked a bit about the S when it comes to the E and the built environment,
Mm-hmm.
especially lab buildings and life sciences.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely energy intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it requires a wide gamut of innovative solutions to ultimately decrease the footprint
Mm-hmm.
in those buildings, and then working with different communities and cities that we serve to make sure that we're driving the dial on some of the environmental regulations that we're seeing emerge in the space.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not only the private sector that's kind of being, it sounds like the sentiment is shifting towards wanting to implement more of those things. And at the same time, depending on the market, there is legislation coming into play that's saying, no, you do have to actually level up. So I'm curious, what are some projects that you and your team are working on right now? Or conversely, are there any in particular that you're really, really proud of? Maybe it's related to like a build out of a lab somewhere, or you mentioned energy efficiency. Like, how are you tackling those problems when, you know, we see, especially in Southern California, Edison tells us to turn off our lights after certain times every day. So I'm curious, you know, what are the things you're working on, or what are things that you're most proud of that you have worked on in your sphere?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely implemented sensors for lighting and things like that, LED lighting, any of the low-hanging fruit. But ultimately, our tenants, they need to keep potentially their samples cold. They can't necessarily turn off their electricity as easy as potentially an office tenant. And so a couple of the programs that we've worked to implement that I'm especially proud of, we're in the midst of launching a hosted solar program. So installing solar across some of our California assets to help our tenants reduce their footprint by ultimately using the energy from that solar. Biomed's able to claim credit for that renewable electricity, and it saves our tenants in cost.
Yeah, and utility costs.
So it's really the triple bottom line. And you asked me earlier to explain the sentiment of ESG. It's expanding the lens so it's not solely focused on the shareholder, but taking into consideration all stakeholders that are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, you know, I'm sure taking the step back and thinking much bigger picture comes with its share of challenges, and having to get more and more stakeholders on board, having to think things through a little bit more holistically. So what challenges have you experienced just kind of getting these practices put into play, these ideas off the ground and into the built world, as you said? And how have you navigated them?
Yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as an ESG 101 or a net zero 101, where we're educating the company on some of the terminology that's ever changing in the space. It can be as much as growing internal engagement and buy-in. So initially really focusing on the relationships across different departments, understanding the risks that they face every day, and also understanding that the programs that they're already implementing, potentially if we just take it one step further, it can also have a huge impact in terms of ESG and how we communicate the value add from putting in those initiatives.
And do you think you've seen pretty good outcomes from doing those things and implementing those and getting people to buy in?
I am extremely grateful to be at the organization that I am because of the buy-in, both from our executive team and our senior leadership.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we want to do proper due diligence. And as I mentioned, by background, I am a CPA, so coming from that financial lens. But as the cost of construction continues to increase, as insurance premiums increase, as a result of some of these physical risks we're seeing from flooding in California, across Texas, and so on, I feel like the appetite is there. It's just a large meal, right? And so I always try and take it in terms of small bites. Started as simple with an amuse-bouche and working over to the main entree.
Soup to nuts, as the phrase goes. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're absolutely right. There has been enough research, maybe that people aren't aware of yet, but there are hard numbers that show from a bottom line perspective, from a social perspective, from just so many reasons to implement some of these practices and think about new development or redevelopment, or even just, like tenant improvements. Really, it makes sense to start trickling these pieces into buildings and into properties. So I'm very stoked that you guys are doing that.
I mean, I would say, especially in this time where bringing people back into the built environment has its own host of challenges, and we're in a position to build labs of the future. So it's not just focusing on the energy reduction measures, on-site renewable energy, but activating the space in a way that empowers people to run into people, to have conversations. How can we provide cutting-edge amenities, sports opportunities, and other opportunities just for employees to intersect with one another?
So that kind of is a good segue, I think, to get more into, more the lab and development sector that you focus on. Just bird's eye view, what, life sciences, it's a very niche corner of commercial real estate, and like you said, it has its very specific needs and challenges. So what are you seeing in terms of either development trends or tenant asks in the space, and what is your long tail view of what trends you think are going to continue the next 5 years, what's maybe dying out? Paint us a picture of the vision of that cutting edge built environment that you guys are working towards.
Yeah, I would say a lot of our tenants are much larger companies in terms of having their own ESG goals that might be more advanced and expedited than some of the regulations we're seeing emerge in the space. And so as time progresses, we're seeing our tenants reach out to understand what are the plans to decarbonize their buildings. What are our net zero plans? When we're going to build a lab of the future, not just focusing on implementing ESG throughout the whole development process, but really ensuring that the building is optimizing electricity and all sources of energy on the outset once it's operating. I think the E will continue to grow in focus. We've seen a lot of changes in regulation across Boston, California, with regards to pushing for more reporting, transparent disclosures. And so I would say there would be a big need in terms of that CPA and ESG intersection. As companies want to use this decision to influence future decision making, it's critical that the data we're analyzing is accurate and valid. And then on the social side, I think people post-pandemic are just trying to find opportunities to meet one another, engage, and again, as I mentioned, activating spaces so people have those opportunities beyond a typical cafe, but maybe a golf simulator, maybe an opportunity for additional programming around mindfulness, coordinating with local farmers markets to provide access to healthy foods. And ultimately, all of that has transpired into value coming back into the organization. So I think As ESG continues to evolve, companies will be able to better quantify the impact of maybe some of these healthy building certifications on, how they're impacting employees and increasing productivity.
Absolutely. And then that just circles back into, well, here's the proof out of the value. The numbers can't lie. So it makes sense to keep investing in these initiatives if it does, in fact, boost ROI and engagement, which sounds like it does. I want to be mindful of our time here. Really appreciate you coming on. But before I let you go, do you have any words of advice for young professionals, especially like young women who want to get into commercial real estate in general, but more specifically in the realm of ESG and working towards those models?
Yeah. I would say, well, firstly, thank you for having me. It really has been great being here and talking about this space that is emerging. There's no denying the impact of engagement from your peers, from colleagues, and ultimately just consistently moving towards their personal goals. So I would say continue to learn. As someone in the ESG space, it's ever evolving. And so once you think you have a grasp of the information, it tends to evolve. And then I would say leading with your heart, keeping your heart open and connecting with people, because you can be phenomenal at your job. But if you care about people, then naturally the two will come together to help elevate.
I love it. Great words of wisdom. Ugh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much again for joining us. If people want to get in touch with you on social media, email, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I would say on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to engage and mentor to whoever might be interested in the space. People come into the world of ESG through many different backgrounds. But for those pursuing accounting that maybe want to expand their skill set, please feel free to reach out. LinkedIn might be the best forum.
All right. Find Shayna on LinkedIn. You heard it here, everyone. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you, everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, do not miss the next one in our Women of Influence series. Visit crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. You can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app, or check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.